Okay, everyone, we are going to get started. First of all, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Meg. I am part of the team here at Arrangements Abroad and the Museum Travel Alliance. We are thrilled to have the opportunity today to hear from one of our lecturers, Alice Iglehart. Alice is a frequent lecturer on MTA travel programs, to which she brings her unique insight informed by many decades of museum education experience. She recently returned from back-to-back programs highlighting historic homes and prized collections in England, Ireland, and Northern Ireland. And perhaps some of you here with us today accompanied her there. In celebration of the landmark 250th anniversary in American history, today Alice will be sharing some insights on great museums of Boston and New England in advance of her leading a trip there this September. If you have any questions throughout Alice's presentation, you can type them into the Q&A chat down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be happy to address them at the end. So without further ado, over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Meg, so much. Thank you all for joining me for this talk, and I hope it entices maybe some of you to join me on this trip in September or one of the upcoming trips. I have, I think, 5 scheduled for 2027. I have been a museum educator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York City for 43 years, mostly spending time teaching people in the galleries. But as Meg mentioned, I've also been working with Museum Travel Alliance. I think it's almost 20 years now, the variety of trips around the world. I'm also a college professor at the School of Visual Arts here in New York, and I give private lectures at local museums and train docents at a lot of museums. This trip is going to be a mix of old and newer art in some of the most prestigious cultural institutions in the United States, based in Boston. And we're going to explore together paintings and furniture and decorative arts in the heart of America's first colonial city. We'll have exclusive private tours by museum staff and contemporary artists everywhere we go. I promise the weather will be cooler in September. It'll be a fun group of travelers to mingle with, and another great way, as Meg mentioned, to celebrate America at 250 years in the cultural center of Massachusetts. I'm going to take us briefly through the trip just to give you a sense of itinerary and some of the places that we will visit and some of the topics that we'll discuss and explore together. So I start out, one thing that I really enjoy about these trips that are basically 5 days long is you unpack once, right? You stay in a fabulous hotel. You've got 4 lovely nights to unwind and explore the city and surrounding areas. I show you a view from the Langham Hotel where we'll be staying. It's really in the heart of downtown, as I think you can see from the image. It is right near the harbor, walking distance. It's only a few miles from the airport and train station. We're going to have only one dinner where you're on your own to sort of feed yourself. And what's convenient about this hotel, as you can see, where I have my cursor right here, is Faneuil Hall Marketplace, and many, many restaurants to choose from. So our hotel is walking distance to great shopping and great restaurants. Very convenient for it. On day 1, everyone's going to arrive by the afternoon and welcomed into the hotel. I'm going to gather everybody in a private room, not only so that we can introduce ourselves to each other and kind of get to know them, but that also I'm going to give one major lecture that focuses on 2 of the greatest Boston artists, traditionally known for being the heart of Boston, and also 2 of the greatest artists of the 18th century. On your left, I show you a can that dates about 1783, and this is, of course, none other by silversmith Paul Revere Jr., silversmith and patriot, I should say. I have a silver kit that I'll bring to the lecture, so this will be a conversation about the whole process of how a silver object is made, as well as going in-depth exploration of some of the fabulous silver pieces that we will see at the many museums and historic homes that we'll go to, and of course tell you quite a bit about Paul Revere Jr. And at the same time, the painting on the right, created by John Singleton Copley, still today considered the finest American colonial artist ever to exist. This is Mrs. John Winthrop. The painting was completed in 1773. It is part of the Met's collection, but the reason I chose it is Mrs. and Mr. Winthrop were very affluent family of Boston, a well-known name, and he was a local lawyer and judge and very well connected to Harvard University. And she was a great horticulturalist. You see that she holds the nectarine in her hand. So these two great artists will have a full exploration right off the bat on day one. And then after my talk, we'll jump from sort of the older artists of the 18th century into very contemporary art, and we're going to have a private reception at the Kingston Gallery. It was founded in 1982, and maybe that sounds fairly recently, but it is one of the oldest art-run cooperatives in New England. The mission is to showcase very high quality contemporary art in all media, mostly painting, sculpture, assemblage. The gallery currently is governed, staffed, and maintained by artist members, and there are three main spaces in this lovely fully lit sort of white box area, three spaces where we might see works by these two contemporary artists whose works are being shown now and should still be there in September. On the left is a work by the artist Linda Cordner. It is entitled The Shape of Things, that she finished just a couple of years ago. And Linda is really interested in color play, light and depth. This is kind of a mix of paint and collage. She's interested in the process of layering abstracted geometric shapes. She's very fascinated with nature, draws from the natural surrounding, and then shapes it, shifts it, colorizes it into these abstract forms. So it's nature. It's also our place in nature, our relationship with it, and also our times of day and how the light of the day can shift and alter the work that she does. On the right-hand side, also showing at the Kingston Gallery, is entitled American Tune by the artist Kurt Ankeny. And Kurt is really interested in not only the history of narrative painting, even going back to the 17th century Dutch artists, but then also more of a modern and contemporary take on the art of comics. And so it's a new form that both pushes and marries kind of narrative in painting, created in a different mode, and expands the concept of storytelling in comics. After our private reception there, we're going to dine together. I think there will probably be a few more things on the menu than just what James Peale's still life of 1820 entitled Balsam Apple and Vegetables. But it'll be nice on our first night again to gather in the evening and get to know each other over a lovely meal together. And then day two, we'll be up bright and early and take a private coach into Cambridge and visit the Fog Museum. And I show you the interior courtyard of the Fog Museum at Harvard University, of course. It has over 50 galleries. It's roughly around 300,000, a little bit more than 300,000 works of art from kind of all over the world. The Fog Museum at Harvard University was first established at the end of the 19th century in 1895. It was a gift a monetary gift by the New York philanthropist Elizabeth Fogg, hence the name for it. And it is the oldest museum or component of Harvard's Art Museum. And it was first founded, her idea was particularly for women, but the study of art history, the teaching of art, the theories of art. It established the first art history classes of Harvard. It had a full lending library and study center. And of course, with the old glass slides that many of us studied for decades. It's renowned for its Western art collections, and it does span from the Middle Ages to the present, including paintings and sculpture, decorative arts, prints, drawings, and photographs. And while we're there on a private tour, we will at first explore the American art collection. And I show you again a painting on the left. One of the premier pieces at the Fogg Museum is John Singleton Copley's portrait of Nicholas Boylston in all his refinery with his turban and silk banyan, both of them probably imported from Turkey or made with French silks. The painting dates around 1767. Boylston, or Boylston Street and Boylston Avenue in Boston, that name will ring bells when we're spending time there. But Boylston was one of the wealthiest merchants and importers into the Boston harbor. And you can see behind the draped red curtain sailing ships in the distance that allude not only to Boston Harbor, but to his occupation. And kind of on the other end of the spectrum from Copley is jumping into the late 19th century. The painting on the right is by American artist John Singer Sargent called The Breakfast Table. And although it is considered a genre painting of kind of capturing a moment of this young woman at the breakfast table and reading, it's actually a portrait of his sister Violet. And even though there's 60 years between these two paintings, both of these artists were extremely interested and explored the idea of light in an interior and texture of fabrics. How do certain fabrics of linen or silk reflect light? And how does the light coming in the natural window or backlighting somebody bring us into the scene? So we will look at paintings like this and also have time in the museum to explore some of the other collections on our own. Next, we shift from paintings of the 18th and 19th century. We jump back to modern art, and we're going to visit the Institute of Contemporary Art, fabulous glass and steel building that hangs out over the water. It was established in 2006. The ICA's permanent collection offers a really diverse overview of both national and international artworks in a range of media. And part of the core, the heart of the Institute of Contemporary Arts collection is the Barbara Lee collection. She was a philanthropist and a political activist and collected works of art for over 30 years that she then donated or gave to the Institute of Contemporary Art. Her collection, though, had a very, very specific theme or focus on it, and that is art by women. It encompasses 85 major works of both the 20th and the 21st century. And three major women artists that are part of the collection that I show you here. On the left is photographer Cindy Sherman's work. I'm sure you're familiar with her. It is untitled, but there is Sherman dressed as a young Marilyn Monroe. The photograph was completed in 1982. In the center, the title is A Flower of 1953. This is painter and sculptor's work, Yayoi Kusuma. You may have been familiar with some of her very large sculptures that have traveled the world. She had spent part of her time in Japan and here in New York City. And on the right-hand side, one of my favorite portrait painters, Alice Neal, painted a portrait of her friend, Vera Beckenhorf. who was also an artist at the time, and that was completed in 1972. So we'll have a fun time private tour at the Institute of Contemporary Art, looking at both works by women and other artists at the time. After lunch, we're going to go from one of the youngest Boston institutes, the Institute of Contemporary Art, to the oldest, literally the oldest building in the city. And to complete day two, we have a private tour with a curator at the Paul Revere House. I show you the back of the house. You can enter it on the front Main Street, but there's also this access entrance at the back of it. In 1770, Paul Revere purchased this new home for himself and his family in February and moved into it to almost the end of his life. And it is owned and operated by a trust, and they have revitalized it in the 1980s, as many historic houses were doing, so that it's rooms that we can visit on two tiers, two floors. And the first one is really set up to reflect the furniture, the inventory of the first owner before Revere purchased it in the 18th century, and that was merchant Robert Howard. He was of English and Dutch descent, and so the first floor room, called the Great Room, really reflects early colonial furnishings, like the Dutch style cupboard that you see on the left-hand side, a lot of turned chairs, William and Mary chairs that were reflection of English design, and again, a Turkish carpet that would be up on the table. And so we'll explore the first floor, get a sense of early colonial furnishings, and then jump up to the second floor to one of the rooms called the Best Chamber. This is the whole second floor, really reflects when Paul Revere and his family occupied it. So all of the furniture in this room dates more late colonial, around 1790. We'll get a chance to explore the chairs that you see here, Chippendale style chairs, a lot of beautiful inlay satin work. We can explore his life, his family's life. I'm very excited to explore not only the furniture with you and style, which would be the Rococo taste, which is exactly what Paul Revere created in his silver work, but also talk about material culture and how these different rooms would have been used by a family in the 17th and 18th century. The house is a great comparison. This ends our second day, but our third day begins with houses of the early 20th century. And so to go from one of the oldest houses of the 18th, 17th, and 18th century in Boston, and then be able to compare it the next day, I think will be a very rich experience for us. Day two, this is the night that you have on your own for dinner. So we will all return to the hotel and then enjoy an evening by ourselves. So I mentioned day three. We're going to go to two extraordinary New England homes, and we'll venture north to Ipswich first. And if you can imagine, this is Castle Hill on the Crane Estate, built to model after a grand English country house. It was completed in 1928 as a summer home for Mr. and Mrs. Richard Teller Crane Jr. The Crane family was in the brass and plumbing business, based in Chicago. And this was created as a summer estate. There are 59 rooms designed by the architect David Adler. The grounds and the gardens were designed by the Olmsted brothers, 3,500 acres, emphasizing both the natural landscape and, as you see here, what's called a Grand Alley all the way down to the water's edge. Inside, we'll explore a Georgian dining room and the bedroom, both of them. Even though the house was built in the 1920s, there was an American revival of the 1920s. And so many grand homes were looking back at furniture styles of the 18th century, similar to what I showed you in the Revere House. So a lot of it will look like English and American furniture of the 18th century. But the idea of this grand bedroom on the right-hand side, the second family that owned it, the estate gathered much of the original furnishings that have come back to the home, going back to the original inventories and the wills of the Cranes. And so it is furnished the way the Cranes would have had it in the early 20s. And then we'll venture to Beauport, which is the Sleeper McCann house that was completed in 1907, right down on the water. It's a very kind of exotic, very eclectic kind of style. So whereas the Castle Hill is one style of Georgian architecture, and then also the interiors very much have the same feel, Beauport is completely different. It's a National Historic Landmark now. It was the summer home of one of America's first professional interior designers, Henry Davis Sleeper. And after Sleeper's death, Beauport was purchased by the McCann's family. And even though they lived in it, they left it exactly the way it was under Henry Sleeper. And I show you a couple of rooms. One is this extraordinary China room. It's called China room, as in everything in here, particularly hand-painted Chinese wallpaper, was an exploration and a celebration of all imported furniture into the Boston harbor of the 18th century. Every room, there are 40 rooms, and each is distinguished by this sort of historical or literary figure, themes of it that Henry Sleeper set out. Each has a different color, a different shape, and objects within the room. I show you one, and then also in another room, a great collection of American and Italian glass. This is the study, which was also called the Gold Room. So no two rooms are the same, and each is more visually dazzling than the last. And we'll have a chance on a private tour to go through all of the rooms that kind of meander and mix and mingle with all of them. Both lunch between these houses and dinner will be a lovely chance again to spend time together and enjoy the local seafood. And if seafood's not your thing, there will be plenty of other things in the menu. But if you'd like, this is the chance to dive into some lovely late summer seafood. Day 4, we're going to another extraordinary major establishment and museum, and that is the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. We'll have a private tour with the curator. The Boston Museum was founded in 1870 by a group of Boston civic leaders, very much like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, almost the exact same year, as a matter of fact. It opened its doors on, interestingly enough, July 4th, 1876. So they were marking the centennial, and how exciting to be going back here at now 250 years later after the founding of the colonies. It showcases ancient artistry, modern masterpieces, local legends, global visionaries. The renowned collection is over 500,000 works, and the goal is to tell the story of the human experience. They have a special exhibition in honor of America's 250 called Art of the Americas 1700 to 1800, which we will explore in depth. I show you Watson and the Shark of 1778, another painting by Johnson and Copley, and a remarkable gold star part of their American collection at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. I also, in addition to that, the array of American art includes everything from the storage jar that you see on the left-hand side that is from middle of the 19th century, dating 1857, by the African-American slave David Drake, who taught himself the English language. You can see some of the writing up at the top, almost by the neck of the vase. This was created in South Carolina, a huge pottery industry under David Drake and many other enslaved artists at the time and workers. And on the right-hand side is kind of a counterbalance, is a portrait of George Washington, an unfinished portrait of George Washington that dates 1796. This is by the American artist Gilbert Stuart, that reflects more of the late colonial federal style portrait painting, and not quite the next generation from Copley, but Stuart was quite a bit younger than Copley. So he's kind of the next version of the great American portrait painter. And this painting and an unfinished of Martha were actually commissioned by Martha to hang, to be fully completed and hang at Mount Vernon. Gilbert Stuart uses one of these to create the presidential portrait that we know so well. We move from the 19th century American ceramics to contemporary Japanese works when we have a private visit and tour of the Pucker Gallery. The Pucker Gallery, I'm showing you 3 Japanese ceramics. These are modern ceramics and assemblage. Their collection is outstanding, and the Pucker Gallery has been in business for decades. It'll be, I think, nice going from the David Drake or American ceramics into the Japanese works. Day 5, we will end, we'll have our formal final dinner on day 4. Last chance for us all to be together and kind of think through and celebrate everything that we saw during the week, and have a nice relaxing evening. And then on day 5 in the morning, we'll get up and we'll visit none other than, this is us having dinner. I completely forgot about this slide. This is by Jan Steen, and I will say that it's the Merry Company on the Terrace. It's from 1670 or so, Dutch artist of Jan Steen's. So we'll have our final lovely dinner and celebration. We may not be as wild as this group, but we'll have a good time together. And then the next morning, our last morning together, we'll go to none other than the exquisite Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I'm sure you all, that is a familiar name to you, but she was an American art collector, philanthropist, world traveler, and founded the museum in Boston, and her entire collection is housed in here. She was known for her very bold personality, sort of unconventional style of also living and collecting. She traveled extensively, amassing a world-class collection spanning European old masters, Asian art, rare books, and decorative arts, which is all laid out in the museum. So I think what's extraordinary about the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, founded by one woman and her private collection, they do not acquire works of art. This is her collection out on view and going through the house in which she lived. And it's lovely to be in somebody's home, so to speak, but then also travel from gallery to gallery. It's mostly laid out a little bit chronologically and thematically. It was opened in 1903 in her Venetian style museum. You can see the center courtyard here, and the photograph was taken up on this second level where all of the primary painting galleries, and it remains as she left it. Really reflecting her vision and cementing her cultural legacy. Included in the collection are 2 of my favorites. One is, this is John Singer Sargent's Virginie Gautreau. He completed in 1884. Many of you are probably familiar with the portrait of the same woman entitled Madame X, that's part of the Metropolitan's collection. He spent the summer with her in 1884 and did a whole series of preliminary graphite sketches, but then also this what's considered an oil sketch painting of her prior to the completing of Madame X. And another portrait, but in this case a self-portrait, is none other than Rembrandt self-portrait that he did at age 23, considered the first self-portrait. This is an oil on oak panel that he completed in 1629. And then at the end of our tour there, we will all proceed to the airport or the train station to head home, hopefully with hearts and minds excited about what we saw and the people that we met, and such an enjoyable time. So I hope you'll join me. We're just over 2 months away from the trip, and there's still room for you to join us. I promise, as I said before, the weather will be cooler than it is now. It'll be a fun group of travelers to mingle with, and another great way to celebrate America at 250 years in the heart of Massachusetts. Thank you so much, and I'm happy if anybody has questions, happy to answer them. So Meg, I don't know if you want to see if there's anything in the chat or you want to add anything.
Yes, absolutely. First, I want to say thank you very much, Alice, of course, for your insights to Boston and the collections of New England. It's certainly a special opportunity to have your informed insights into these objects that reflect the storied legacy of the region. So as Alice mentioned, we are now opening up to questions. If you have had any insights, connections that you made during the presentation, or if you're curious about Alice's approach to these objects or collections, she's happy to stay in chat, as she said. So don't be shy. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a square that says Q&A. And pop in there, type out a question. I'll be monitoring them, and we'll get your questions answered. We'll stay on for a few minutes to give everyone the opportunity to type those in. As they come in, just a reminder, everyone who has joined today's webinar will receive an email with a recording. If you're eager to see some of what we've heard about today in person, you can, of course, join Alice this September, the 14th to the 18th. More information will be in that same follow-up email, and you can find out more information as always, on our website, arrangementsabroad.com. So, opening up to any questions. Don't be shy. Let the questions come in. If you don't mind, Alice, I have a quick question.
Sure.
The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is the site of the famous Gardner heist. And so are those famed empty frames still there, and will we get to see them on your visit?
They are still there. We will have time, I think, after the tour. We may be able to go into the room that has them as part of the tour. I've been speaking to the educator who will give us the tour in some of the really specific pieces that I would love this group to see. But yes, the frames are still there. The whole discussion about it is not on a tour because the story is in depth. And as a matter of fact, if anybody wants to go on to whether you're traveling with me or not, the Isabella Stewart Gardner has a whole section on their website about the story behind the heist. And as much as they know, it is still an ongoing process of trying to find who actually took them. So there's a big question mark. But yes, the frames are still there, left purposefully exactly the way they were first displayed when she lived there.
Fabulous. We have a question here from Mary Page. She asks, how much will you be going into women artists, historical or contemporary?
At every museum that we go to, particularly the Fog and and the Isabella Stewart Gardner and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Those artists are hanging with the male artists. We will talk about them when we're there, and also certainly going to the Institute of Contemporary Art. Really like to focus on the Barbara Lee collection, and they are separate galleries. And I don't think I mentioned it before. Thank you for the question. At each of these museums, I hope to have some free time so that we'll have our private tour and be able to ask the curators or contemporary artists as we go on it as an open conversation. But then some time where I can take some of us to specific works of art, or you can wander around on your own, so that it's not always with us as a group. So if there is a particular interest of a different part of the collection of any of these museums that maybe doesn't necessarily focus on American art, you are more than welcome to do that. And also, I don't know if this helps a little bit, but when we're on a private coach going to these different, particularly going up to Ipswich, and I will give a primer before we go to these institutions. So again, I can give a little story of how these museums were founded, who owned the houses that we're going to, highlight some works of art or pieces of furniture that I want us to consider before we even get to them. So I like these trips to be very open conversations. I am very big on visual analysis too when we're looking at works of art or pieces of furniture or pieces of silver, of really sort of digesting what we see and then also mixing in the art history or the facts, as you will.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alice. We have another question here from Lori, who asks, what is the maximum number of guests on the tours? I know as we've planned this tour, we tried to keep it a little bit small. The maximum amount of guests, 22 travelers. Can you lend a little bit of insight as to why we're keeping it a little bit small for this program?
Oh, for asking me?
Yes.
Well, one is when you go to a museum, even something as expansive as the FOG or the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and even more specifically when we're having private tours at historic houses, it is a much more intimate experience for everybody. It's a much more conversational approach when you have like 20 or 22 people as opposed to a much larger group. Often museums and historic houses have limits of how many people can travel as a group within the galleries. And so it's both a restriction or something that the museums are asking for. If it was a much larger group, we'd be dividing into much smaller pods, if you will, to travel around. But I always find having, up to 20 people or 22 people to be a much more enjoyable experience for everybody, because it lends to more, as I mentioned, more intimate experiences. It's easy for 20 people to get around a work of art as opposed to 40 people, and hopefully enjoy an enjoyable experience for everybody.
Absolutely agree. Thank you, Lori, for your question. If you have any more questions, of course, you can use the Q&A function down at the bottom. Alice will remain here for a few minutes and is happy to answer anything you may ask. We have another a comment here from Brian Goyette, one of our tour directors. It says, hello, Alice, what an amazing tour you put together. So wish I could make it.
Hi, Brian. Hopefully we can travel together in 2027. I've got a lot coming up there. All the best to you, Brian. Thank you.
Absolutely. Another question from Luciana says, thank you, Alice, for your presentation. Will the tour also cover some of the engineering aspects of the buildings that we visit, with more the physicality of how they're put together?
I would assume engineering, you reference maybe the architects and things like that. I can certainly go into that, particularly with the two historic houses up in Ipswich. They were kind of tour de forces when they were being created. one more of sort of the arts and crafts and the other of more of a traditional Georgian. So yes, it will be included in the discussion. Will it be a huge focus? Probably not, but I will certainly talk in, and it's also part of, creating the Isabella Stewart Gardner or the Boston Museum of Art. What was the interest and style of architecture for those? Because it's quite a variety, even just within the city of Boston.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alice. We'll stay on just for another few minutes if there are any last questions to come in. Any last insights? I would hate for anyone to be left out. Okay, wonderful. If you have any questions, you can, of course, email our team. We would be happy to answer any inquiries that come our way. Alice, thank you again for lending your time and your expertise to us today. I know that I, for one, have felt very edified by learning more about the great collections of Boston and New England. If you enjoyed